Okay, let's do a quick overview of chapter 1. Make sure that you read the example the first day of class. It's a very good example that helps you understand what influence is and what power is in terms of politics, because power is very important in terms of politics. Make sure that you read the definition of politics, where politics is defined as a process of who gets what, when, and how. Also, make sure that you read about political elite. It's interesting in the United States how money plays a factor in terms of power. And that will lead us to page 6, where it talks about the growth of U.S. income inequality, which may give you a little bit of an insight on a couple of things. Make sure you look at the need for government, and underneath that, look at political conflict, where it talks about it's a struggle over the distribution of a group's valued things. Make sure you know the difference between democracy and a representative democracy. As we look a little closer at the textbook, make sure that you know what government is a political organization that does what two things. And your book outlines what those two things are. And then your book goes on to talk about why is politics important. Politics is important because politics impacts you on a daily basis. We don't think about the government being involved in our life, but government is heavily involved in what we do. Think about this. If you drove to work this morning, the automobile that you drove in has to pass federal and state guidelines in terms of whether or not you can drive it. The sidewalk that you walked on into class has to pass local, state, and federal guidelines in terms of making sure that they provide accessibility to everyone, including the disabled. Government impacts everything that you do, whether you believe it or not, it does. That's why studying American government is so important. So I'm going to encourage you to start looking at the news, looking at news events, because the discussion that is planned for this week talks about homelessness. And there are some things in this discussion that I was not even aware of. Homelessness in terms of people sleeping in their cars, and the fact that people are homeless in some areas and they make great money, they drive a great car. It's just it's too expensive for them to live where they work. And then it's too expensive to live further away than where they work. So make sure that you start watching the news. Make sure that you read this chapter. Take the quiz for this chapter and do the discussion board this week. All right. Have a good week. And remember, you can always contact me if you have questions.